So I'm here at St Gregory's Church in Bedale in North Yorkshire with my copy of Yorkshire, the North Riding, recently revised in the Buildings of England series. And let's have a look around this amazing historic church. Bedale is a rural North Yorkshire market town 7 miles from Northallerton, a stop-off on the Great North Road in its Georgian heyday and nowadays just about visible from the A1. The wide main street of the marketplace is lined with numerous period shop fronts and properties, passing by the 14th century market cross before reaching the medieval parish church at one end. This street plan is essentially unchanged since medieval times. St Gregory's Church is the prominent landmark of the town. At a rough guess, based on the hour and a half I spent here in the last week of December, the church must surely see over 100 visitors on a bad day. The massive west tower is decorated Gothic, probably 14th century, with a later medieval bell stage towards the top. The possibility that this was a defensive tower is raised by the great thickness of its walls and by the fact that there appears to have been a first-floor dwelling whose entrance was protected by a portcullis. The interior setting of the church is a beautiful sight and will please anyone who enjoys a medieval church with a traditional English postcard aesthetic. Bedale's great triumph is light. A lofty nave with a clerestory, wide south aisle with large windows permit natural light to bounce from white surface to white surface of the washed walls. The architecture of the interior is varied and its chronology is discussed at length in the Buildings of England Yorkshire North Riding volume. Essentially, each major period of later medieval architecture is accounted for somewhere and in some form, amongst some not unpleasant but rather extensive Victorian Gothic imitation. The Victoria County History of the North Riding, published in 1914, states, "The building is of very great interest, but has been so thoroughly dealt with by the modern restorer that there is hardly any internal masonry which has not been retooled. Nevertheless, it is still, over 100 years later, of very great interest." The north aisle nave arcade is particularly interesting with its strange decorated piers and arches. Here is ornament somewhere between bullflower and pellet motifs, and all the piers are different, but everywhere the pattern is continued as if the arcade suffers from a stone boil ailment. Despite this north aisle nave arcade being early 19th century in date, it is thought to be an accurate imitation of its medieval predecessor. The overall appearance is undeniably eye-catching. Another highlight is the east window at the end of the south aisle. A particularly wide window by all accounts and with a very delicate tracery. This is an excellent 5-light geometrical tracery, said to have come originally from Jervaux Abbey or resembling one at Easby Abbey, although it's generally thought that this was probably original to the church after all. By all accounts, the window is a product of the late 13th century or thereabouts, when Sir Brian Fitzalan rebuilt an existing chantry chapel in this location and was likely a deliberate design request for his final resting place. Today, the south aisle with its large east window could be a separate church all of its own. I didn't seek out the crypt at St Gregory's Church when I decided to visit on this day, which was an oversight on my part. So I move on now to the dark north aisle, where a brilliant 14th century wall painting depicting St George slaying the dragon can be seen. This is quite a well-known depiction, and a famous wall painting where not many survive in Yorkshire. It was restored and recoloured in 1931 by eminent artists of their time, Shrigley and Hunt. Other wall paintings, all later in date, also adorn the church walls, and are equally interesting and telling of changing practices and tastes in church decoration in later centuries. Medieval effigies have all since been relocated to their current position at the west end of the nave. Many other features of historic interest fill the pages of this church's 3-page description in the recently published Yorkshire the North Riding in the Buildings of England series. For the once wealthy medieval foundations of the rural North Riding, this volume is not one to leave home without. and I highly recommend a trip to Bedale and St Gregory's Church.